Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Truth to Power. Of course, we have ourselves a brilliant intro that was done by our graphics team. A great job by them. And of course, this is another episode of our new current affairs show right here on ITV Networks. My name is Faraz Patel and I do hope you had yourself a good week. Of course, South Africa is now on level 4 of the ease lockdown restrictions. So the question is, when will the country go back to level 3 and then from there move down the levels? Of course, that all remains to be seen. Now, in today's episode of Truth to Power, we have split it in two. On the first half an hour, we are going to be talking to Her Excellency, the Turkish ambassador to South Africa, Mrs. Elif Ilgen. And then, of course, in the second half hour, we're going to be talking to the SATU Secretary General, Mugwena Maluleke, to discuss the reopening of schools and, of course, the union's take on it. So, of course, let's go to our first guest. And, of course, it is the Turkish ambassador to South Africa, Her Excellency, Mrs. Elif Ilgen. Her Excellency, thank you so much for joining us, and Assalamu alaikum to you.
Hello, dear ITV audiences, dear ITV, Assalamu alaikum. It's a great pleasure to be back. It's like in family now.
No, definitely, and you're definitely part of our family, as Turkey has, of course, embraced South Africa during this difficult time. But Ambassador, before I talk about, obviously, Turkey's helping in South Africa during COVID-19, let's just give a brief history about Turkey's relationship with South Africa, because this started, of course, during the time of the late President Nelson Mandela.
That's very true. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. It's a great pleasure joining the Truth to Power today. Yes, indeed, Turkey and South Africa had always enjoyed warm relations, even way before 150 years ago, at the time when there was the Ottoman Empire, and the emperor at that time had sent a religious scholar, Ebu Bekir Efendi, to that time, to the Western Cape, and he was one of the, I would say, pioneers of the Muslim communities that has so well flourished in this wonderful soil since then. And that's why we have really, especially a good reputation, thanks to the Ebu Bekir Efendi's heritage, especially in the hearts and minds of the Muslim communities of this beautiful country. But then later, of course, once the Republic was established, the friendly relationship between Turkey and South Africa had always, been cherished by both parties. And I'm very happy and honored indeed to see that since the visit of the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the margins of the BRICS summit in mid-2018, we have even maybe taken another important cornerstone in bringing our bilateral relationship to a higher level. And in that sense, we are looking into every potential, every aspect to flourish. Of course, these are difficult times at the times of the pandemic. And even then, as I would say, regional leaders, both South Africa and Turkey, we are taking some important roles in the fight against the pandemic. Let me also humbly congratulate the government and the people of South Africa in their very effective and, I would say, timely measures that they had taken. Similarly, Turkey is also, of course, on the one hand, fighting effectively with this pandemic, but also is taking, indeed, an exemplary role thanks to our very well-prepared health sector and, of course, to the very devoted personnel in the health sectors. We are doing very well in this fight, relatively speaking. Of course, there are challenges. Let me share you maybe the very recent figures in Turkey. They seem to be very high, but because it's partly the population of the Republic of Turkey is high, we are more than 80 million people, and the daily number of the tests are very high. But still, the good news is that the recovering numbers of the patients are far more than the new infected patients. And we do strongly believe that we are flattening the curve in Turkey. And inshallah, we wish the same to South Africa, we do have a strong belief that everything is on track and everything will be better. Let me also say a few words at the beginning to all the fellow audience of ITV. Ramadan Kareem. It is, of course, a heartbroken Ramadan for all of us. Ramadan is the time of coming together, of sharing. We can't do it now face to face due to the social distancing, but our hearts and minds are with all of them who are sacrificing in this month.
Ramadan Kareem to you also, Ambassador, and to the rest of your consulate and to the rest of the nation of Turkey. Ambassador, of course, you spoke about the bilateral agreements between Turkey and South Africa, and just emphasize the role that Turkey have played in assisting South Africa with COVID-19, because I know it was last week or the week before that Turkey had sent through a shipment of medical supplies to South Africa in assisting our healthcare workers who truly do need it at this very moment.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this up. It was a modest contribution between friends, if I may say. The request did not come from the South African part, but at that time there was an already ongoing trade between our military defense industry, I would say, representations. And when we knew that there were some aircraft going to land in South Africa, the Turkish president gave the instructions that they should bring some medical equipment, including some personal protection equipment, and we're glad that they came safely. Turkey, during the time of the pandemic, has sent medical equipment and aid to more than 60 countries around the world. Of course, we are very proud of the situation that our own resources are good enough for ourselves, and now we are able to help our friends around the globe, and we find it as a duty, of course.
Ambassador, let's talk about Turkey, of course, and how they're handling the crisis at this very moment. We've seen that Europe is going to be going through a potential recession because, of course, Western Europe has the potential of the GDP that's going to be contracting. So how are Turkey dealing in terms of their own domestic issue with regards to COVID-19? And what is Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's plan in terms of making sure that the Turkish economy doesn't contract itself?
The Turkish economy, of course, first and foremost, depends very much on the Turkish human manforce. We are proud to have a good human skills. We are one of the major countries in manufacturing. We are very much I would say, dependent in many sectors of the economy. But of course, nobody will be saved from the huge economic recession. And according to some experts, of course, this is going to be the second that would be followed by the big recession many years ago, just after the First World War. So obviously we are trying to prepare ourselves, and not only as individual countries, but also as group of countries. I know there is also a lot of discussion going on amongst the G20, where South Africa is also a member, among other regional groups. So the priority currently is, of course, in our health sectors, but we know that the worst hit sector will be the economy. So the Turkish people, the Turkish economy is also prepared, but the size of the crisis is so big that no country was caught in a full preparedness, obviously. But as I said, we trust on the men and women that makes up the Republic of Turkey. We trust on our human skills. We trust on our good hearts and our hardworking capabilities. And inshallah, we will come over this. There is, of course, a lot of structural, economic, also legal work going on in many countries, also in South Africa, but in Turkey, to immediately react to the shortages that are going to be caused by this pandemic. But I think we will yet to see. Every country is first and foremost taking care of its own domestic needs, obviously. But we also must act responsibly, because as the slogan goes, we are not alone in this. And the stronger, more together we come, the stronger we will. And no virus is stronger than the will of humanity.
Without a doubt, and I mean to that also at the same time. Ambassador, I want to talk about, the relationship that South Africa has with Turkey, because, ever since President Cyril Ramaphosa, of course, has been the president of the country for the last 2.5 years, part of his drive is in order to get international investment within the country. So from a Turkish perspective, what are the chances of Turkey heavily investing in South Africa in terms of companies and ultimately creating employment in a country that is lacking employment right now with a very, very high unemployment rate?
You're asking very thorny questions, if I may say, but yes, let's take it just before the pandemic. The Turkish position was, of course, to cooperate with South Africa, but on a mutually agreed basis, which is going to end up as a win-win situation. This is indeed the strategy of Turkey for the whole continent of Africa. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we do not have a lot of Turkish investments. An outstanding one, which I can also proudly share with you, is, for example, the company DeFi, which is a proudly South African brand, but 100% owned by a Turkish company. And for example, the mother company of DeFi in Turkey, which is known as Arçelik, is also a very skilled company in electronics, in mechanics, and they were part of the team, the engineering team that was immediately built upon the instructions of the president to build and establish the Turkish ventilation machines, which are vitally needed in the fight against this pandemic. And again, in a very short span of time, like shorter than a month, a group of those companies, which Arçelik DeFi was part of, were able to produce the first national built ventilators, which we started to send to those countries who are in need. And indeed here, I know DeFi has also submitted an offer to be part of that nationally built ventilators, which are extremely needed in the health sector. Other than that, of course, we are also looking into other sectors. The trade between Turkey and South Africa had been doing well, particularly in the field of mines and particularly gold, where South Africa has been doing really very good in the world, and coal, of course. But as I said, after this pandemic, all the cards will be reshuffled. Obviously, Turkey's intention towards this country and the continent in general remains the same. But I think there will be also a lot of limits on individuals who are looking forward to invest abroad, but rather with a more maybe narrow mind, at least right after the crisis, the economic crisis that's coming very heavily. Maybe we will look. And when I say we, I think everybody will be looking more domestically for a while. But as the embassy here and as our Ministry of Trade, we are encouraging Turkish entrepreneurs, and we are particularly encouraging them to look with an open mind and open heart to South Africa, because we know there is a very big potential there to explore for them.
Ambassador, let's go to Turkey and let's talk about Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan. I know in 2016 he had survived a coup d'etat, but what was striking about it was that the people, the citizens of Turkey were backing the president. They believe in their president. They believe in what he stands for. So the question is, how has Turkey flourished under President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in terms of getting them as a modernized nation right now?
Yes, indeed, the current President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, has been in power in Turkey with his political party at the helm for almost 18 years now. And in all of the elections that he has participated as the leader of his party, he was able to receive the majority of the support of the Turkish people. And as you had mentioned, unfortunately, just after the unsuccessful coup attempt against his life, but also against the Turkish democracy, the Turkish institutions, the Turkish people, which took place in 15 July 2016. It was by the help of the Turkish people from all walks of life. And that is the important point here. It was not only the people or the followers of one political party, namely the party of the president, but people from all walks went into the streets because we could not accept the fact that simply in 2016, Turkey should not be a scene for military or whatsoever coup d'etats. So after that, there was, of course, the support towards the president had increased. But at the end of the day, Turkey is a democratic country. And every 5 years we have our elections, and there is a voice for the opposition as well. So we will see. But the fact is that in the last 20 years, Turkey had particularly did very well in its economic transformation program. And in that sense, of course, I do personally believe that this model also can play an exemplary role for countries where the economic transformation is yet to be done, accomplished, if I may say. But again, in this transformation, of course, the leadership is very important. But coming back to the role of the people, every individual has its own role to play. If a country of the size of South Africa, of Turkey, of millions of people coming from different walks of life, we have to do our own share to make sure that we do a successful transformation where everybody, every individual feels himself, herself, comfortable with.
Ambassador, of course, Islam has played such a huge role in Turkey, especially during the era of the Ottoman Empire, where throughout the world the spread of Islam was massive. Of course, from all the people who have visited Turkey, especially a number of family members and friends, they've said the Islamic perspective, the Islamic institution of Turkey remains, but of course there needs to be a modernization of the country. So how is Prime Minister Erdogan able to balance the two, balancing Islam and modernization at the same time?
I think this is what Turkey does very well. In the whole, I would say maybe, and of course I can't be very objective on that as a Turk myself and as a Muslim at the same time. And this we owe to our national struggle, mostly. So it was Mustafa Kemal Atatürk who built upon the ashes of the Ottoman Empire a very modern and a secular republic. Throughout years, of course, we had our own challenges, both sometimes with Islam, sometimes with modernity, sometimes with secularism. So by the time when the current government came to power in the early 2000s, Turkey was already an established republic with its implementations, with its legal structures, with its religious, non-religious, secular structures as well. So I think it is mostly, and as a woman, I can very confidently say, I find also the situation in South Africa a very healthy one, especially vis-a-vis the lifestyles and the practices of the Muslims of South Africa, because I do believe also in order to practice fully our religion, our freedoms, we need a secular, a free system, a society which is tolerant, but where everybody finds himself, herself, a way to make himself and his families happy. And that's what we do feel in Turkey. And that's, I think, also the secret why, especially because I meet many of the Muslim representatives of the Muslim communities who keep visiting Turkey, and some of them had very good intentions of even buying some homes in Turkey, sending their young daughters, boys for studies in Turkey. And when they come back, and you know what they tell me is, they find a similar society to South Africa. They find tolerance, but at the same time, they find very solid Islamic structures. They find freedom. They find lots of joy when they visit the museum, the mosques, but they are also free to enjoy the liberties that come with a free society. I think, and that's why we are very similar. That's why I feel myself very comfortable in your country as a Muslim woman, because this country is also the place, the land of the free, the land of the tolerant. And I think President Erdogan knows this very well. That's why, despite putting his very Muslim character always in the front, he also respects the secular structures of Turkey, and there has never been a debate about that in Turkey. Of course, there is in a society of as I said, of our size, people coming from different walks of life. The first rule is to build the society upon very solid structures where everybody can find their own ways to become happy, to feel free, but also respect the equal rights of the other.
Ambassador, and it's a pleasure having you definitely in our country. Now, Ambassador, of course, you and I both know of a famous series called Ep02. Everyone is watching it. When it came out last year on Netflix, every single person watched it, Muslim or non-Muslim. Let's talk about the impact of Ep02 it has had on the tourism of Turkey, because everyone knows of the Karavanseries, everyone knows of the Kahi tribe. Yeah, there you go, putting your hand there, of the Kahi tribe. And just the legacy that the family of Suleiman Shah has created in terms of the Ottoman Empire shaping in that way.
Well, let me confess one thing. I started to watch the whole series after I've seen this huge impact coming from the Muslim communities, but also even non-Muslims, which reached out our embassy through official channels, I can say. Last year, these days, we were receiving video clips of wedding ceremonies organized with the theme of Dirilish Ertuğrul at the background. You know, the groom entering the saloon on the horseback, and the bride and the whole girls being, dressed like the Kayi Hatuns, and the little youngsters, acting all in a very heroic way, like we have been, watching them in this Dirilish Ertuğrul. It is, of course, it's a wonderful thing to witness this. It is part of our culture. I myself, ethnically, I'm a Kayi.
Okay.
I must say. And indeed, I also had the pleasure of hosting some of those very, very big fanatics who were able to reach to us. So it is a great, I must say, soft power as well, talking from a political science perspective. But Turkey is using this, Turkey is quite, I think, after the United States, the Turkish soapies, they call it,
yes.
the TV series are second in terms of the ones that are sold to most expensive prices. Now, if you enter Netflix, you will see also another, hundreds of other Turkish TV series. But of course, Dirilish Ertuğrul was also very particular in the way that it touched really the hearts of many Muslim families, and which made me even more happier that women had become even more fanatics than men. So we were able to reach out to the women, in some cases in very close and in very, very conservative communities. So this, I think, was the success. Of course, it also served a lot in terms of tourism. And yes, we forgot to touch upon tourism, which is also going to be hit hard, unfortunately, after this pandemic. But inshallah, we will do our best. I look forward, once hopefully everything comes normal and our flight schedules are back and our very proud national flag carrier Turkish Airlines starts flying so many times to this beautiful land and carry you to us and our people to you. But yes, this I can't deny the impact of Dirilish Ertuğrul. Now the second season is yet to come. In Turkey, it was started to be aired. It is called Kuruluş Osman, because Osman is indeed the real founder of the empire. And if you would ask me, I find Ottoman a little bit more handsome than Ertuğrul. And this has become the most in political sentence of this interview, I must say.
The ambassador, and I'm definitely looking forward to watching Osman and just seeing the foundations of the great Ottoman Empire that, of course, extended its arm throughout the world, giving us more and more teachings of Islam. Ambassador Mrs. Elif Ölgen, shukran so much for making the time and joining us here on ITV Networks, and hopefully we'll have you again on our channel.
Thank you very much.
Well, there we go. Her Excellency, Mrs. Elif Ulgan, the ambassador of Turkey to South Africa, just talking about the Turkish relationship with South Africa and, of course, just how much President or Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has assisted President Cyril Ramaphosa and our healthcare workers in making sure they can go ahead and combat COVID-19. Well, that's, of course, the first half an hour of Truth to Power. After the break, we'll be talking the state of our schools and whether or not pupils and teachers need to return back to schools during COVID-19 in a period when the virus has not peaked. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Truth to Power. My name is Faraz Patel. We are in the second half an hour of our current affairs show here on ITV Networks. Now, of course, last week, the Department of Basic Education had outlined the dates for the returns of pupils, specifically looking at grade 7 and matric learners. But the question does remain, with the virus of COVID-19 yet to peak in our country, is it really a good idea to send teachers and pupils back to school? Well, joining us on Skype, I have the General Secretary of SADTU, Mokoena Maluleke. Mokoena, good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us on Truth to Power.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having us today.
Mokoena, I just want to get SADTU's take on the potential returning of pupils and teachers to school, because the virus has yet not peaked. The question of social distancing is obviously going to come into the matter. So what is SADTU's take on the whole matter with regards to the potential of staff returning to school?
Our position as the organization has been presented to the Department of Education in what we call a 14-point plan, where we're saying we need to look at the safety first of our members and all the teachers in the country and our education support personnel and our practitioners before they can return to the schools. We have entered into some discussion with the department in terms of the non-negotiables that must be there in the form of your personnel protective equipment that must be there at the school, water and sanitation, and the sanitizers, but also continuously screening on a daily basis of the teachers and the learners if they were to come to school. We were clear that in terms of level 4 restrictions, it is not conducive for the schools to reopen at that time, because we still have a lot of other parents who are at home, and therefore their learners will then be leaving them and going to school. So we're clear that to the department, you are not prepared, you are not ready in terms of level 4 alert on the virus, because yes, whilst it is important that we are able to look at the school calendar, we're not in control of the virus. What we're in control is the school calendar, which we can adjust it in order to ensure that we address those critical areas, such as your grade 12, at the right time, and having looked at the safety of both the learners and the teachers.
Mokoena, of course, there is going to be consultations between SADTU, other various unions representing the education sector, and of course the Basic Department of Education. So what are the unions unilaterally agreeing on to make sure that there can be a phased in of pupils and teachers when, of course, the conditions are conducive?
The trade unions as a collective are in agreement that, look, the phased-in approach is what the globe is practicing in order, one, to address the issue of the physical distancing, which we call social distancing in our classrooms. Secondly, it is to appreciate the fact that there are a lot of uncertainties about this particular virus, and therefore a phased-in approach gives the department and the teachers and ourselves an opportunity at the right time to be able to prepare for this particular virus, for how long it's going to be with us, but at the same time to ensure that those who are there, they are protected because there can be social distancing in the classroom. Secondly, it is that they are able to have enough sanitizers, but also they are also able to be screened, and we are able to practice hygiene all the time. So it needs time for us to be able to start experimenting and training our learners. So if we have got fewer learners in a phase-in approach, but not in the middle of winter, because in the middle of winter, we are going to start creating more problems for the learners because there's an influenza season, and therefore it is not really conducive in level 4.
Mogoena, I want to talk about social distancing because, of course, and we're not going to be discussing private schools or Model C schools which can make sure that social distancing can be done. I want to focus on schools in the townships because social distancing in those schools are going to be the biggest challenge that could arise.
Yes, in the township schools and the rural schools, the social distancing is going to be almost practically impossible unless indeed we have got only one grade coming at a time, and then therefore looking at the possibility of stretching the phase in our schools so that we are able to do the social distancing. First and foremost is that we need to understand and appreciate that those classes have got to be reduced from 40 to almost 20 or even less for you to be able to have social distancing in the classroom. And therefore that means all the teachers that are there will have to attend to this particular grade that is there. But if we don't do that, we will not be able to have social distancing. There will be no physical distancing. But at the same time, our schoolyards are also small. They don't have places where we can really gather the children because we've got to ensure that even if they're not in the classroom, they need fresh air. They need to be out there as children because they like playing. So they need more supervision. And therefore, social distance is also required outside the classroom. And you have got to look at that and make sure that you comply with the regulation so that we do not really become epicenters of this particular virus. So yeah, there are challenges. We are concerned. We have fears. And therefore, we need to work hard to ensure that the plan that comes is informed by the medical health experts who do the role modeling and the planning, but also is informed by the safety of our children and of our communities.
Mogoena, I want to talk about the teachers that are represented by SADTU. There are about 407,000 teachers in public schools. I can't really tell the percentage that are being represented by SADTU, but what if they unilaterally, as the teachers, come through to the union and voice their concerns about, and I'm assuming one of those concerns would definitely be the cleansing and of course the chances of the virus being spread in those schools. Those are definitely two topics that I'm sure the teachers may have come up through to you.
Yes, our 70% of our teachers have raised those particular concerns. Hence, we are saying the department is not ready to receive them as yet. And therefore, that's why we have made it a non-negotiable to have a mask to ensure that the screening, to ensure that they are having sanitized as water and soap as the strongest weapon against the virus. And obviously, it's the unity of all of us, the 407,000 teachers, to work together in this particular period to ensure that indeed we can help in the containing of the spread, but also we can help in the fight against this particular virus. So yes, they have raised issues around the issue of marking. For example, they ask, how are we going to mark the books for the learners if this particular virus is able to remain on the surfaces for 3 hours or maybe 3 days and so forth? Those are the issues that the medical experts are looking at, the scientists are looking at now, so that we're saying we also have to be factor that into the plan, so that the plan is solid to then say to the teacher, yeah, you can mark, there is no danger, or you have got to use any other form of assessing the learners in order to avoid the spread of that. They are asking us about their core morbidities to say, if I have a pre-existing condition of an ailment, such as diabetic and asthma, what is it that is going to be done? We have said to the department, we need to address that in a form of a regulation to ensure that everybody is aware, is clear how to declare and where to declare and what is going to happen to that information, because it's highly confidential, and therefore the department has to come up with a regulation around that. We've also asked the question, because our members ask us, I am pregnant at the moment, and therefore what's going to happen? Am I in danger if I go back to work? and we have asked that particular questions, and we are receiving an assurances of our medical experts who are doing research to say they will come back to us very soon to answer that particular question on whether the teacher is in danger, or even the unborn child can be in danger during these particular pregnancies. So yes, these are some of the questions, and you are right. They are asking us, we are responding to them on a daily basis. And however, it is the Department of Education that can finally be saying, here is the plan, this is how we're going to protect you, and we are not going to be adding to the numbers that we see going up on a daily basis. We are, in actual fact, going to reduce the numbers, and that is what the teachers want to hear. That is what our education personnel want to hear from the minister. Hence, we have said the minister must come back on the 10th to address the nation and say, is she ready? Is her plan solid? Are the teachers, are the learners safe?
Mugwena, I want to talk about the scale that SADTU have created for the teachers that obviously the union represents. There is from I am okay to I am terrified. I'm assuming most of the teachers, or most of the 70% that are represented by SADTU, are going with the I am terrified because the virus has yet to peak in South Africa.
Yes, the platform that we have created through working with our regional and branch secretaries, what we call NEF Center COVID information sharing, we receive those kind of fears to say, I'm afraid. And we're saying to them, yes, you've got to be concerned, you've got to be afraid, you've got to be scared. However, it is important that we also, as teachers, as people who build nation, to then provide solution and say, what are the solutions that can really address this particular issue, and how can we together, and as a globe, because it's not only South Africa, we see many countries are phasing in, the coming back, the reopening of our school. So we are sharing on a daily basis that particular information to say, yes, you are right to be scared, you are right to be afraid, you are right to do that. But at the same time, most of our teachers are also saying to us, we want to help our children. How can we help our children whilst we are still at home, so that they are not behind, especially the question you asked at the beginning. The township schools, the rural schools are not online, they don't have data, and therefore they are also saying, how can we help them whilst we are still at home? So the teachers are not sitting there and not doing anything. They are coming up with proposals such as, if we were to phase in, can we have also a rotational basis? So you have some learners coming 2 days, and then they don't come, and you have the other learners coming on another 2 days, and then, or maybe you look at the cycle of 8 days, and so forth and so forth. So those are the areas that our members are really helping us to think about how we can model a safe plan for us to return to school when it is safe, not under level 4. I must indicate, and I must stress this thing, level 4 is almost like level 5. It is still very early for us to bring our learners back at work.
Mugwena, I want to talk about what Minister Angie Motshekga said last week about parents needing to continue to pay school fees. Is that a statement that SADTU as an organization backs? Because a number of parents obviously have not been working during the level 5 of the lockdown. Some of them had to stay at home. Some of them have had their salaries slashed by whatever percentage that the companies they do represent. So my question is the paying of school fees by parents, the request, that Angie Motshekga, Minister Angie Motshekga has asked for, is that something that SADTU agrees on?
Well, that's a very controversial kind of point, because those particular members or teachers who are not being paid because the parents are not able to pay at the moment are also our members. So that's why I'm saying it's a very controversial. At the same time, at a principle level, SADTU says that education must be free because it's a public good, and therefore that those who are working must be paid because we cannot have a modern slavery in a democracy and in our country. So at the same time, I'm saying it's controversial because it clashes with our principle of saying education must not be sold, and therefore it must be given for free, and those who are working must be paid a salary. At the same time, we are saying that it is important that the schools that have the teachers that they have not been paid, they must pay them. They must find a way of really paying them, because they must also appreciate the fact that there is a stimulus package that is being offered by the government, that as employers, they must also approach the UIF and apply for that, instead of really threatening the parents who are at home, who are not working, who their salaries have also been slashed. And there must be some kind of a cooperation that they must find. But also, the virus has taught us that those particular institutions in our country that are still using the model of school fees, they also have got to apply for an insurance for the loss of income on behalf of the workers that are there. So they must pay those particular teachers and education support personnel who are there. So we do not agree with threatening of the parents to pay under the circumstances. But at the same time, we're saying the teachers who are not paid are also parents, and therefore we must strike a balance. Can the UIF come in and help both the schools and the parents who are not being paid at this particular present moment? However, it's important that education must remain a public good, and therefore it must be given for free, because it's a basic human right.
Mogwena, I want to ask about, obviously, when the Minister Angie Motshekga comes and does announce to the public. I know that you've asked her to speak, obviously, on the 10th of May. Now, I know that a number of industries within South Africa have either done retrenchments or at the same time have cut salaries. Now, my question to you is, I know that teachers aren't being paid a hefty amount of money. I know it's an industry where, of course, the teachers do not get paid such a great salary. They are earning a basic salary. And of course, that is something that, of course, a lot of teachers would be wanting there to be an increase in salaries. What is SADTU's fear that there could be a possibility that there's going to be a request for teachers to get a salary cut in an economy that we have right now?
The fear is legitimate, that as an organization, we're beginning to ponder on that particular question and say how it's going to be our response. Should we be requested to really reduce the salaries of the education support personnel and our teachers and our lecturers in our colleges in order to address the issues of the economy? And we are taking those particular discussions very seriously and learning from the other global organizations and other countries where such might have happened, or an attempt has been made around that particular issue. But I must indicate the response that we are receiving from a number of our leaders and a number of our members is that the teacher's salary is not enough with the work that they are doing, and therefore it will be unjustified for the government to request them to also even halve the salaries or even cut their salaries, because with those particular salaries, they also support a number of learners in our schools. They improvise to ensure that the school classrooms have got teaching aid. And in certain instances, they also pay for these particular learners some school fees in the very same schools that they are teaching. So with the meager salary that they are receiving, allow them to keep it, do not cut it.
Mogwena, I want to talk about when school does return. I know you've mentioned that level 4 isn't preferably where you'd want, obviously, the teachers and the pupils to return to schools, especially schools in the townships where social distancing is a major problem. What, with regards to the Department of Education and the Department of Health, what is SADTU wanting there to be in order to make sure that the health comes first for the teachers and the pupils? And I personally can give one, for example, the continuous screenings of pupils and teachers. So added to that, what is SADTU looking for in terms of making sure that the health of the pupils and the teachers are taken first in terms of the priority of it?
Our priorities, first and foremost, is that water is a basic need, and therefore those schools that are 3,400 schools without water, first and foremost, they have got to be provided with water. The issue of an ablution is an issue of Section 10, is an issue of Section 11. In terms of our Constitution, is a decree of safety, and therefore it has got to be available. We cannot have schools without ablution, because that is going to encourage the virus to spread. So the issue of washing with water and soap is fundamental in terms of our hygiene. It's very fundamental, and therefore we're beginning to believe that there must be even a manual, there must be some way of technology brought on board where we are able to drill our children, to drill our teachers, to ensure that from time to time they know that as I get out of the classroom, I must wash my hands with soap, I must sanitize. As I go back into the classroom, I must sanitize my hands, and I have cleaned my hands, and so forth. So that is very much fundamental for us. Continuous refreshing or sanitizing of the desks, of the chairs, of the doors, and everywhere else where the learners are touching, in the toilet seats, and everywhere else, is a non-negotiable. That will ensure that the teachers are safe and the learners are safe at the right moment when they are back. Because if we're not having the additional personnel to deal with those particular things in the school, we're going to sit with a crisis where these particular areas will remain with contamination, which then unfortunately will contaminate the entire school, and which is not what we are requiring. So additional staff must be employed to ensure that cleaning happens every 2 hours. When we have to give learners the 2 hours to really go out there and get refreshment, because we are now in a what I call masks revolution, because we are now going to be speaking through the mask. The learners are not going to hear everything. They are going to be having some heat that is going to cause some nauseous for them. They will be wearing masks, and therefore every 2 hours we need to have a break. They must get fresh air. They must go out there to do that. So therefore it would mean we need people to immediately get into the classroom, clean those particular classrooms, so that when they come back, the surfaces are clean. Because the issue here are the surfaces that are an issue. And then we are saying these are the fundamentals that must be there. There must be screening there. You cannot come into the schoolyard without having been screened, because that is very fundamental. Therefore, we need psychosocial services. We need health people to assist us in that. That is one of those non-negotiables. Working with learners, after a long closure like this, they are already having some psychological problem. Many of our learners, they've got anxiety on whether they're going to be able to complete the year, or are they going to lose this particular year. The teachers are having some severe psychological, emotional problem for having missed their learners, but also fearing for their safety at the same time. You need to then have psychologists, your social services in the form of social workers, and your therapies must be part of an integrated plan, so that they are then able to feel safety. So we are calling upon the department to encourage all the other partners that work with wellness of the workers to be part of this particular program in an integrated fashion, to ensure that we don't miss some of the things that we are not aware of, and address this particular issue of safety.
One final question, Mokoena, before I let you go. I think there is one thing that COVID-19 and the lockdown has exposed, is that there are certain areas which government had just had a blind eye on, and all of a sudden now they're going ahead and they're fixing those problems. Education still remains one of them. When COVID-19 is done, when the virus does become history, what is SADTU's call to the Department of Education to make sure that this sector, this part of the country, gets its full attention?
Is that there should be no school without water. Because this has been a light that has been really put upon the pre-existing conditions of how apartheid regime has really structured the life of the poor, but also designed some value in terms of how they have to be valued and so forth. So the lack of that particular value to the life of the poor by our government and the regime, the previous regime, is what we would want to say is history. We no longer have a school in this country that has got no water, that has got no pollution in this country, that we no longer have a school that has got no connectivity in this particular country, as well as a school that has got no electricity. It must be history when the COVID-19 is going to be history to us. So it must go with this thing to then say all children are equal, they must receive equal education and equal dignity, and therefore they must have everything that everyone has in this particular school. So those are the things that have been exposed, has been illuminated by COVID-19, and therefore, because the light is now on there and we can all see, it is important that we fix these particular issues and so forth. So that's what I can say. No school without water, no school without toilet. I mean, in 26 years, what are you saying? To have a school today that has got no toilet, that has got no water. What is your conscience saying as a politician? What is your conscience saying as a member of the community, that I have allowed my child to be so indignified, to be so, So fine, vandalized in terms of the dignity. What am I saying about the teacher who is really building a nation to work in a school that has got no water, that has got no toilets, and so forth? That must be history. We send the light, we send the illumination. That at least today we can agree. We see the department in 3 weeks they want to fix everything that they could have fixed in 26 years.
Mogoena Maluleke, the General Secretary of SATU, thank you so much for making the time for us here on Truth to Power.
Thank you so much.
Oh, there we go, Mogoena Maluleke, the General Secretary of SATU, just explaining to us of course, the way forward with regards to schools. Of course, there have been dates that were set out by Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga. But of course, you've heard what the General Secretary said. Water and sanitation. That is all. That is all what the schools are asking for. No more pit toilets. We've seen so many incidents of this happening. So many young kids losing their lives because the basic human rights of water and sanitation are not there anymore. And that's just one part of it. Of course, with COVID-19 being there, and if schools are about to reopen, what about the social distancing space that is going to be there, especially in the townships, especially in the rural areas where social distancing has not become the norm during this lockdown? So, of course, all eyes are going to be on the Minister of Basic Education, Angie Motshekga, on what her way is going to be. Of course, SATU and the other unions have come together and have decided that they do not want schools to open during lockdown level 4. So the question is, will the Basic Education Department give into it, or will they go ahead and make their own decisions with regards to this? So this has been another edition of Truth to Power. Of course, we had the Turkish ambassador to South Africa discussing the relationship between the Eastern European nation and, of course, South Africa. And, of course, in the second hour, we had Mogoena Maluleke discussing the school scenario and the reopening of it and whether or not it needs to happen. Well, my name is Faraz Patel. This has been Truth to Power. Thank you so much for joining us from the team and myself. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and have yourself a fantastic afternoon.